Today I'm going to be talking to you about Agile city leadership. The first thing to think about when you're thinking about Agile is it's not a methodology. It's a set of values and it's a set of principles. So originally this was developed for software teams, but increasingly it's being used in different forums and different settings across the world. And really the values here is all about people. People are the most important value within the Agile Manifesto. And what we're trying to do here is to establish something that's operational, that works, rather than writing a set of guidance that might just sit on a shelf for a few weeks or months. We think we put customers at the centre of everything to do with Agile. The most important thing is to have regular outcomes for our customers. And it's also relying on continual reflection, continual improvement, and continual retrospectives and agility and reaction. Traditionally, local authorities and many other institutions across Europe have used what's called the waterfall method of managing programmes. So this is where you plan for something, you build something, you test it, you review it, and only then do you actually implement it and deploy it. And what we're trying to do with Agile is to move to a more sort of iterative process. The same steps are involved, but rather than going plan first, build second, test third, you're sort of doing it in an iterative way. And you're constantly going round the cycle and coming back to different ways of doing things, reviewing what you're doing and doing them differently and better with your customer at the heart of everything that you do. That might sound all very intangible, quite difficult to get your head around. And for me, definitely, I would say 5 years ago, I was definitely a traditional waterfall manager. I liked everything organised. I liked to have my work plan. I'd work from A to Z. I'd work through it sequentially. I'd accept the occasional curveball, but find them quite difficult. But then when I started working in tech in London, I was introduced to a woman called Emma, and she introduced me to Agile way of working. And initially for me, it was really scary. We were launching a product. She wanted to launch the website on the same day that we launched the product. We hadn't even started the website a week before the launch. But she said, come on now, we can do it. All we've got to do is get something up, chuck it up, we'll collect the data, and then we'll refine it over the next few weeks and months. So that's what we did. And continuously working with her, I learnt that just getting something done, doing something quickly, accepting it might not be perfect, but just getting something done and then learning from the data that you collect from your customers is a really much better and refreshing way of working. So I still struggle with it occasionally. I'd say that I am strategically winging it most of the time. Think of this as a set of principles and a set of values, not a methodology. So when it comes to principles, we're thinking about a simple approach to everything you're doing. We're thinking about customer satisfaction, customer focus, and customer outcomes, frequent customer outcomes. So for cities, this means who are your customers? You have to identify your customers and deliver frequent outcomes for them. These are your residents, they might be your businesses, but they're all people who live and work in your city.
It is very difficult for cities to innovate around the homelessness because many stakeholders are involved. And usually it is not agile at all. They had the possibility to say, I will try, and if it doesn't work, it will also be okay. So for us, agile policy making meant, for example, to combine existing services in new ways. So to say, the people from the health services never worked with the people from the police or from the housing services. What if we create a dedicated team? And for some time, only for 3 people, they will follow this team. Another example that I can give is to take an existing service of job integration that was never meant to be for homeless people and try and adapt it to homeless people. So again, taking existing experiences and combining them into a new way of working.
I know that this is quite a lot to take in for the first time, if this is the first time that you've heard about it. But I was really happy to see this being recognised in a document written by the World Economic Forum. So they've done some work on how cities across the world can maximise the returns on digital. And they've identified some key enablers and execution principles. And they've actually put agile and digital savvy leadership right at the heart of what they think are the sort of success factors for getting the best return on digital in the world's cities. There are loads of different methodologies that you can adapt, some of which are paid for, some of which are free. There's lots of training you can do in order to work in an agile way. The most popular one that most people use is Scrum. Many of you will have heard of the Scrum method. I think if you do decide to try and work in an agile way, I would definitely recommend doing some Scrum training. And it's all about sort of working in short sprints and then reviewing what you've done in that short time, and then deciding what you're going to do next in the next sprint, and then going again. So there's a whole process behind Scrum. I'm not going to go into detail, but I can recommend some reading at the end of the presentation. I didn't want to finish without thinking a little bit about how this relates to the lean startup methodology, because they are two separate things, but they're also really interlinked. And I think when it comes to thinking about how cities we can use agile methodologies, it's all about having a massive vision and a great ambition, but being prepared and willing and almost embracing the need to experiment and iterate and gather customer insights. So you're thinking big, but you're actually starting quite small. So you're going to have this big vision, big ambition, but you're going to start small and do sort of lots of little tests, little small scale experiments. And it's all about detecting problems early, preventing big problems later on, testing your assumptions all the way you go through, avoiding what they call analysis paralysis. I really like that term. So don't get bogged down in all the data and all the detail. But you do need to have actionable, accessible and auditable metrics, and that will help you actually understand what's working, what's not working, and how you need to maybe fail fast, pivot to a different way of working, or persevere and go again, but just adapt slightly. So the other thing I really like about Lean Startup, which is really relevant to cities, is it has this sort of learn, build, measure, learn sort of flow of ideas. So I really like, particularly for URBACT action planning networks, I think if you're building something, you need to measure the small scale experiments that you're doing, learn from those small scale experiments, and then you build again. So I quite like that sort of flow, and I think that's really relevant for Europe City.
We are working in a more efficient ways, and we are using design thinking techniques to design services and to project conceptualization. About the area of people and relationships, we now are listening more to the beneficiary of our work. We are empowering them, and in the teams between the business areas and the IT team, the complaints have been replaced by collaboration. It's a better climate of work.
If the last 2 or 3 years have taught us anything, it's that we have to embrace change. Those people like myself who actually find change quite difficult probably found everything that's happened around COVID really quite challenging and difficult to work with. And cities, I think we all who work in cities need to be better able to respond to this constantly evolving change and these constantly evolving challenges that we're dealing with. And what agile methods, values and principles enable you to do is to deliver incremental change through continuous improvement. It's more collaborative, it can avoid costly mistakes, and I think it's great that URBACT is also starting to really experiment in this space. I've always found URBACT methodologies amazing things to work with. I just wanted to mention some resources that I would encourage people to look at if they're interested in learning more. So there's a couple of documents on the slide around the work in Barcelona and in the ROOF network, but also there's 3 books here which I've read and I would encourage people to read. So first of all, Scrum, which is called The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. Secondly, and I've already mentioned this, the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And thirdly, Agile for Everyone. So all of those 3 books are really good, quite easy to read. Resources, obviously you can also find audio versions of them, and there's loads of stuff on YouTube and the like. But hopefully what I've done today is give you a real whistle-stop tour through the whole notion of Agile, and I would really urge you to consider using it in your cities.